Hey, Jen, about voting rights and these Texas lawmakers who have come to Washington, do you know any examples from his 36 years in the Senate that Joe Biden just hopped on a train and left town to avoid a vote that he knew he was going to lose?
Welcome back. Look, I think that the president's view is that these Texas legislators were making a statement through action in opposition to efforts in their state to oppose restrictions on people's fundamental rights and their rights to vote in their state. That is why they departed. The vice president met with these legislators yesterday, and the president, I should say, certainly applauds their actions and their outspoken opposition to states to efforts to put in place restrictive measures in their state.
And maybe it is funny to think about it that way, but the president is talking about this as the most serious assault on our democracy.
I don't think anything about this is funny. I think what is important to note, though, here is that there are 28 states, including Texas, where there are laws in place or in process to make it harder to vote. And it requires bold action. It requires bold voices to speak out against that and make sure people understand their rights. That's exactly what's happening.
If you were looking for the most misleading bad faith question possible, this would be it. Here, Peter Doocy asks if Joe Biden ever hopped on a train and left town to avoid a vote that he knew he would lose, a reference to Texas Democrats leaving the state to deprive their Republican counterparts of the quorum needed to pass legislation, most notably their voter suppression bill. And so with some very, very minor amount of context, you can see how, despite what Doocy is suggesting here, this isn't just Democrats getting on a train and leaving town like this is some kind of a temper tantrum. This is Texas Democrats doing everything they can to protect their constituents' most fundamental right as Americans, amid what can only be called an all-out assault by Republicans who know they can't win if they play fair. And by the way, let's not pretend for a second that this is just happening in a vacuum. It's not like Texas Democrats just woke up one day and decided to be obstinate. The fact is that Texas Dems are perpetually in the minority and lose quite often on issues ranging from abortion to immigration to guns. But this is different, because this isn't just about losing fair and square on some single legislative issue. This is about not allowing Republicans to legislate Democrats out of government. This is about stopping the GOP from perhaps the greatest abuse of power possible in what's supposed to be a democracy. This is existential. That is why they've left the state. So for Doocy to frame this without any of that context is a testament to just how much of a partisan hack he is. The fact is that Peter Doocy's own network is partially responsible for what we're seeing right now, because Fox News is part of that entire interconnected right-wing infrastructure wherein Trump created the big lie that the election was stolen, Republicans repeated his claim because God forbid anyone on the right have an original thought, right-wing media delivered that message to their viewers, Republican politicians pointed to those news reports as validation of the claims that they themselves made up, and on they go, with each person validating the next and creating a feedback loop wherein they've manifested this reality where the election was stolen from Trump, and so these state legislatures have no choice but to pass voter integrity laws. But it's nothing more than a coordinated disinformation campaign, the end goal of which is to brazenly undermine democracy for the express purpose of consolidating power for themselves. The fact is that voter integrity laws suggest that there's currently some lack of integrity in the system, that there was some type of nefarious activity. And as much as Republicans are trying to manifest this into reality, it doesn't exist. And don't just take it from me, Republicans tried to prove fraud in more than 60 court cases and failed every single time, including in front of more than half a dozen judges who Trump himself appointed. Trump's own DOJ said there was no fraud, his DHS said there was no fraud, Republican secretaries of state said there was no fraud, recounts and audits confirmed there was no fraud. At this point, the only thing left for Republicans to bank on is whatever the latest Rudy Giuliani fever dream is. All of that is to say that if there was even a shred, a modicum of fraud, they've had ample opportunity to prove it. The fact that they couldn't is a testament to just how laughably false their argument is. And look, I know I say these things a lot, but if I have to repeat them every single day, I will. Because clearly the Republicans have one strategy, and that is to do whatever they can to convince people that an election that was provably secure was somehow the greatest fraud in American history. Their strategy relies on Democrats simply assuming people are smart enough to know better, and then Republicans are going to go in and fill that vacuum with disinformation, because the GOP will stop at nothing to manipulate their own supporters. And by the way, we've seen this before. This is the strategy on the right. It's Trump's entire game. For example, he repeated this idea that he was totally and completely exonerated by the Mueller report, despite the Mueller report quite literally saying the opposite. But he willed his alternate reality into existence for the right by virtue of repeating it. He did the same by calling his own impeachment a witch hunt despite the overwhelming evidence. Hell, the guy even admitted to this strategy just a few days ago.
If you say it long enough, hard enough, often enough, people will start to believe it. That's what happened with Russia. That's what happened with Ukraine. That's what happened with, well, the worst is when they don't say it, like the laptop from hell.
In case anyone was wondering just how freely and shamelessly Trump will lie to his own supporters. So look, whether it's Donald Trump or Peter Doocy or any other Republican operative involved in this disinformation campaign, the whole point here is for everyone involved to keep up the big lie that the election was stolen, because so long as they can do that, then Republican-led state legislatures will have the cover they need to continue passing their egregiously anti-democratic voter suppression bills. And not only do we need to call it out, which is what I try to do with videos like this, but we should also support those Democrats in Texas who left their families, their homes, their other jobs, and their state to do their part to protect democracy. Even from the minority, they're still managing to succeed, even if only temporarily, against the worst, most anti-democratic impulses from the right. So with that said, if you want to show your support, please donate and make sure that they have the resources they need to continue fighting this fight. I've linked an Act Blue where 100% of the donations go directly to the Texas House Democratic Campaign Committee, meaning directly to those House Democrats in Texas, so that for as long as it takes for national Democrats to step up and figure out how to get the For the People Act passed, these Texas Democrats don't have to worry about also figuring out how to cover their costs. They risked everything to be able to do this, and they're the only ones putting adequate pressure on national Democrats right now when it comes to voting rights. So please, if you can, show them some support and let them know that they're not in this fight alone. If you enjoyed that video and you're looking for a deeper dive, check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. It's a no BS look at the top stories of the week, along with interviews with the top names in politics, like Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Katie Porter, Pete Buttigieg, and more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Also, if you want to see more videos like this one, click the subscribe link right here on this screen to join the more than 1 million people who've already subscribed to my channel. And finally, to donate to my Don't Be a Mitch Fund, where I'm raising money for a whole raft of different voter outreach and voter registration groups in the closest states ahead of midterms in 2022, including Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Texas. You can find that link on this screen as well. Thanks for watching.